In the long term, your mountain bike is always going to suffer some battle scars from when you're out riding, whether that's just rocks flicking up and hitting your paintwork, the unlucky crashes, putting your bike in the back of the car, uplift trucks, all that sort of stuff. It's going to take its toll on your bike finish. So what you really want to do is look after this with some protective film. Today I'm going to be putting some on Neil's bike, which is brand new, so get the start off on a good foot here, make sure it looks nice and good from the start. But you don't have to have a new bike to do this. You can do this on your bike you've already been riding and just ensure your paint finish looks as good as it does now until the day you want to sell it. So tools for the job. Firstly, you're going to need a frame protection kit of some kind, some rubber mastic tape, electrical tape, cable ties, bike cleaner, isopropyl alcohol, scissors, and if necessary, a hairdryer or heat gun. First things first, you're going to need some sort of frame protection kit. There are various different ones available on the market, from the basic ones like this that come pre-cut for various sections of the bike, or you can get yourself some 3M Helitape which comes in sheets like this or in rolls, or you can go for a full-blown kit made by someone like Invisiframe that do them custom made per bike. Of course, we've just gone for the easy option here because it's nice and cheap, affordable, easy to apply. So before you get carried away sticking the stuff on, you want to make sure your bike is completely clean in the areas that you're going to put the tape in place. If your bike is made of aluminium, you want to make sure the frame is warm, so keep it inside overnight beforehand, or if necessary, heat up the sections of tube just with a hairdryer. No need to go over the top, this is purely just to help the adhesive on the stuff stick onto the frame properly. It's less of an issue with the carbon frame just because the material's got a warmer feel to it. So because we're not using an entire frame kit, we're using just selective little patches. We want to make sure we get them in the right places on the bike. So what we're looking for here are likely areas where rocks and stuff are going to sort of contact when they fly up, areas where the cables are going to contact the frame when perhaps the suspension moves or the handlebars turn, and other areas as well, like the top tube, which is a good classic, where your knee pads rub on the tube and just sort of dull the finish down. So we're just going to look at addressing those. We're going to start with the top tube first. Looking at the top tube here on Neil's bike, I've got the longest section in the kit. The main area I'm focused on is actually the sort of the grey section here between the curve on the seat mast here and the curve just on the underside of the top tube. So what you need to factor in is the fact that there is a curve in the frame, so that's going to make it difficult when you're making a good contact for this to stick to. So I'm going to trim this accurately so it just falls short of here because it's never going to really see much sort of use, and just to make sure it wraps on the underside here. So to do that, a stencil is a good idea. So I actually made a bit of a paper stencil a second ago. It just lines up along the top here and it roughly follows the shape that I intend to cut to. And that covers that main section of the top tube, the area that Neil's going to rub his knee on and that sort of stuff when he's out on the trail. And it also doesn't interfere too much with the lines of the bike. So I've used a stencil just to sort of cut the shape roughly how I want it. Something that's just important to remember is when you're cutting this yourself, don't leave any square edges, because if it's going to lift up anywhere, that's where you're going to snag it. So just cut small round ends in just to help it stay in place, whatever the weather. This particular kit you just fit on a clean dry tube and you just sort of push the air bubbles out by hand. But some kits like the 3M stuff, a lot of people say it's best to wet fit them by using some sort of like shampoo or a detergent of some kind, mix with water, and you spray on, you float the kit around until it's in the right place and use a squeegee to gently push the sort of moisture out, and it helps it stick in a perfect place. Again, don't need to with this particular one, but just make sure whichever kit you buy, you just follow the right instructions for that. So it's really important just to make sure you just get this on as best as you can so it stays on your bike for as long as possible, and more importantly, it looks really good as well. You don't really want to be drawn to any sort of bubbles in the sort of plastic. So I'm just going to start up towards the head tube end just by sort of the carbon sign here. Just going to peel back about an inch of this and then just get this centralised. Now I'm not going to do the side straight away, I'm just going to do the top. I'm going to curve it around afterwards. Just going to make sure I get it as lined up as I possibly can. Of course, doing it with these kits, it's a lot cheaper, they're a lot easier to replace when they go wrong. If you invest in one of the full-size frame kits that cover everything, you really need to take your time installing these, and they can take a couple of hours with some of the more fiddly frame designs. What we're doing here on Neil's bike is just covering up just one of the two areas that he tends to sort of get a bit knackered on his bikes, I've noticed from previous bikes. Now you just want to take your time and make sure it's going on as smoothly as possible with no air bubbles, and it will continue to look good for quite a long time. It's a good idea to do this before your bike does get too nasty and dented and dinged, and you'll barely even know that the protection is on there. And it is a good idea to do this indoors just to make sure that the adhesive stays nice and warm. It's going to give it the best chance of bonding properly with your frame. So up on the front of the head tube here, this is obviously the business end of the bike. You've got the cables and the controls. So on Neil's particular bike, he's got a dropper post cable and his rear brake cable coming out of the right side of the head tube here, just this internal routing here. And you can see under full steering lock, they kind of rub on the head tube here. So we just want to make sure it's protected underneath so it doesn't get scuffed and lose its paint. And also the same for the other way around, so that's his rear shifter cable. So I'm just going to make a marking here on where we want the protection to be. Again, I'm going to cut this to sort of fit so it looks as neat as it can possibly be and get it in place. So I just want to peel this off to the halfway point so I can make sure it lines up exactly where I want it to. I'm going to work my way around just like I did with the one on the top tube. So you can obviously see it up close. That's one of the negatives with anything like this, but it's a frame protection kit. You're going to be thankful for it in the long run when you don't start losing your paintwork. Now on this particular frame, it's got some down tube protection at the bottom where rocks fly up, but nothing on the top part of the tube. Arguably, you won't get any rocks flying up and damaging your tube in this area, but if you do uplifts on your friend's pickup truck, where you lean the bike over the back, you can make a nice handy pad here just to stop your framework being doled down by the pickup pad that sits over the back. When you're installing this on the down tube here, it's important to just take into account the curvature of the tube again, just like I did with the top tube. I noticed when I turn the fork to the side, the sort of area that needs protecting is roughly from the edge of the fork crown downwards. So this is actually the perfect sort of length. And if I just offer this up, I notice it's actually sitting almost perfectly on where the grey meets the orange. So make a nice line, so hopefully it will blend in well with the frame. Now I know from measuring this up, I've got to go about 2 mil below this line. It's going to line up perfectly. Alright, so you can slightly see the edge, but once it's been ridden a bit, you're never going to know that's there. And more importantly, if he does put his bike on the back of his mate's pickup truck, I know he's got one and he's probably watching this video, it'll sit on there nicely. It's not going to wear his nice little paint finish away. Okay, so Neil's bike's got internal routing on the down tube here, and just where the cable exits, where it joins the seat stay here and goes direct to the rear mech, it can sort of rattle around and just sort of contact with the seat tube there, and the same on the other side for the disc brake outer. So I'm just going to put a little piece on the underside here just to make sure the paint finish stays as good as it can for as long as possible. There's some pre-shaped sections here that are ideal sort of sized, so just taking one of those. Again, I'm just going to use a piece of backing that I've already used on the back here, so I don't get the oils off my thumb on there. So obviously the smaller pieces like this, you can see them a bit more. If you ride clipped in, you'll probably find your feet don't sort of move around too much. But I do know that Neil likes to ride flat pedals quite a lot. And one of the things that flat pedal riders tend to do is move their foot position around loads. And you quite often get bits of seat stay and chain stay with paint sort of just rubbed off from their ankles. And it's not really a bad riding thing, it's just the fact that you're moving around in quite an aggressive way. So I've got enough here in a real good size just to protect the seat stay on Neil's bike. So I'm just going to cut a strip here to do both sides. And same thing as with the other sections, you just want to make sure they've got rounded edges so they've got the best chance of staying on for as long as possible. Again, you can see that there's a piece in place, but at a distance you're never going to know. And if your heels do rub just on the seat stays here, you're not going to be losing any paint. Next up, noticed on this nuke-proof bike, it's got really good chainstay protector here that extends all the way along on the back side here where the chain contacts right by the chainring. So that is fantastic, but I also noticed there's nothing on the underside here. I'm going to clean the inside of that and then using this magical tape from 3M, so this is a rubber mastic tape. So it's an electrician's tape by trade, but it's actually one of the best things in the world that a biker can own. So it's basically self-amalgamating tape that sticks on anything and provides really good protection for your frame. Although the chain tension is really good these days with a clutch mech, I know how Neil rides, so I am just going to put a little bit extra on the underside here. I know he likes a silent bike as well, so this will make it stealthy. I'm going to do this all in one hit. So I've already cleaned this. It's just going to sit along the underside like so. You'll especially notice the effect of silencing your bike like this if you ride a lot of rough, rocky and fast trails where you've got your chain slapping around. You actually need to check at first to see if your chain's still on, because you make your bike that much more silent. It's kind of spooky. So there you go, using a bare minimum cheap sort of frame protection kit, managed to give Neil's bike a good bit of protection around the head tube from cable rub, down tube if he chooses to put it on the back of a pickup, top tube here from his knee pad, just one of the more crucial ones, and of course for other cables and stuff. And then using the rubber, managed to just sort his chain stays and seat stays out. So it's a really good little way of protecting your bike and making sure it stays looking better for longer, and of course quieting it down as well. Hopefully it's been useful for you. For a couple more videos, check up here to winterize your bike. That's protecting your bike for winter and all the nasty stuff that happens. And for 10 cable tie hacks and bodges, particular favourite, click down there. Don't forget to click on the globe in the middle here to subscribe. Brand new video every single day, just like this one. And of course, if you found this video helpful, give us a thumbs up.